Rafa Camara has secured a place in history as what I'd call the most dominant F3 champion to date. But was it all about the car? Hello and welcome for the Motorsports fans. A bit later in the week than usual, but we will explore the fast car merchant allegations surrounding Rafa Camara's title, the ever-changing dynamics of the F2 title fight, all the Formula Regional action and Dean Hoogendoorn's European Karting title. So let's get straight to it. Formula 3 saw a record-breaking early title secured for Rafa Camara, doing it in style with a mind-blowing 4th feature win of the year. If ever there was a reverse sprint merchant, it's probably him. We've done a lot of Camara glazing all year, so no need to go into too much detail, but I do want it on the record that this is really the most impressive thing about his excellent season, the fact that he nearly exclusively did it in the features. Did he have the best car? You can certainly make that case, but I don't think it is as clear-cut as people want to make you believe on the socials. And he still absolutely destroyed both his teammates all year long anyway, so even if that was the fastest car all along, this was still a stunning season from the Brazilian rising star. Ferrari will have some difficult decisions to make in a year or two. This now leaves us with a battle for P2, which will most likely go down between Nicolas Olof, Tim Tramnitz and, quite surprisingly so, Mari Boyer, with the Aston Martin Jr. even leading that battle in the moment thanks to horrible qualifying form from both Tramnitz and Zoloff. While I do put it down to mostly the lack of consistency from Zoloff and more recently Tramnitz, though that could be part of a bigger MP downfall as well, credit where credit is due. Boyer is absolutely outperforming all expectations in the moment and has seemingly transformed from consistently decent to consistently great over the course of the season. Is this just experience or has something finally clicked? Time will tell, but for the first time in his lengthy F3 stint, he is getting me properly excited for his future. In other news, Tuukka Taponen has finally had a good weekend again. It really has been way too long. Had anyone told me he'd leave the season without a win, I wouldn't have believed you, and yet here we are. An ART failure that really needs to be looked at further post-season, I reckon. The team I considered to have the strongest lineup pound for pound going into the year barely has a driver in the top 8 of the championship, and it definitely didn't look like a driver issue for the most part. This does bring up the question, will Taponen return for a title attack next year? I would like to see it for selfish entertainment reasons, but for his career, I reckon, much like Yugo Chukwu, he'd do well with jumping straight up to F2, considering how age-biased modern F1 teams appear to be. Of course, I need to shout out Taz Interprovazak for his 2nd win of the season, absolutely delighted with that one. And it further highlights just how great a package Campos is bringing week in, week out. For everybody calling out Camara for only winning in the fastest car, I'd suggest observing the Campos guys a bit more closely. I wouldn't claim to know what package was quicker over the full season, but the gap surely wasn't big either way. Meanwhile in F2 the title fight is still alive and well, with the magnificent Leonardo Fornaroli now finding himself with one of the more comfortable leads we've seen all year, thanks to utter dominance from Invicta this weekend. Not to take anything away from him, a first feature win is a great job no matter what, but we do have to take note of how dominant the car looked here. Alex Dunn may have pulled off the overtake of the year with that send past Lindblad in the sprint, but has still slipped back to P5 overall. Those unnecessary crashes in the past are really coming back to bite him now. I do want to highlight Jack Crawford as well, performing with remarkable consistency in a car that looks like a back marker in Kush Maini's hands. Sure, objectively speaking, that is basically impossible, but there is a case to be made for him having potentially the weakest team out of the top 5 true remaining title contenders. It's between him and Vashor's MP if you ask me. Codil might make the Rodin look like shit as well, but first of all, Codil is a considerably worse driver than Maini, and Dunn has a proper race-dominating pace at times, something Crawford has really not experienced all year long. How would you rank the equipment of the current top 5? Let me know down in the comments. I feel like our interpretations of this season in the future will heavily rely on this ranking. Once again, we need to bring up just how mad unlucky Victor Martin has been all season long. This feature race, unfortunately, no exception. The guy that came in as a key title player 2 years in a row has been fucked over by ART, the Alpine Academy and the racing gods themselves, but this lack of results does not make him any worse of a driver. I still think he is F1 material, and since that will never happen for him, he should hopefully walk into another professional seat somewhere next season. He is certainly way too good to fight for a top 10 finish in F2. Quick shout out for Olli Goethe taking his first double scoring weekend in F2, and more importantly, he was essentially matching Verschoor in terms of performance this time out, something he really hasn't come close to all year. You know my feelings, I don't rate Goethe particularly highly on this level, but it is still nice to watch him improve. He is the sort of character that might be a big surprise next year, I reckon. For the F1 segment, I couldn't help but talk about the Brazilian sensation Gabriele Bortoleto once again. A new personal best of P6, comfortably beating in-form Nico Hülkenberg along the way and doing it all in a Sauber. Bortoleto might just have a claim to be the best rookie of the season. Really, with Alpine being a mess, Lawson getting screwed by racing for Red Bull early on, and Ollie Behrman falling just a little flat compared to the high expectations, I think the Rookie of the Year question comes down to Isaac Hadjar, Kimi Antonelli and Bortoleto at the moment. And between those, as much as it hurts me to say, Antonelli definitely has the weakest claim at the moment with his poor form over the European season. Make no mistake, I still think he's a future world champion, but this does still help making Bortoleto look even better. Rookie of the Year while competing against drivers of this caliber is one hell of an achievement. Why exactly didn't I rate him after his F3 title again? We'll never know, I guess. GB3's return to Silverstone saw a huge grid with a bunch of drivers giving their debut in the class, and that's what I want to focus on in this segment. Euroformula Open contender Yvan David, British F4 race winner August Raber, USF Juniors rookies Patricio and Rodrigo Gonzalez, and USA F4 champion Nicola Stati did join the grid to get some valuable Silverstone experience, along with the return of Red Bull Junior Enzo Tannenwitschkel and former series competitor Michael Shin. Shin might not be the most talented of the bunch, but certainly made use of his experience, even scoring his maiden podium in a regular grid race, though aided by some chaos ahead. The Gonzalez brothers were a bit odd to judge, as they were actually competing for two different teams, with CDR notably shitting the bed for both Rodrigo Gonzalez and Stati. Meanwhile, Patricio Gonzalez got one of the best results of any of the guest starters with a solid P12, and he got that pretty much on merit as well. Surprisingly, David only went slightly better with a personal best of P10 and being largely anonymous in the other races. Considering Axel Motorsports is a decent enough outfit, I had definitely expected a little bit more from the rapid Sri Lankan. Tannenwitschkel was solid, though not particularly impressive, given he has raced here before, and Raber really just had a bang average debut weekend. Nothing flashy, but just clicking off those crucial laps. I wonder how many of these cameos might end up as full season competitors on the grid next year. I actually think all of them would make pretty neat additions to the grid. At the front, Alex Ninovic has further cemented his status as the title favourite, despite a race-ending incident from the lead with Dean Fairclough. Ninovic looks unstoppable once he goes to the lead, and, as the reverse grids have shown time and time again, knows how to work his way through the pack as well. Definitely considerably more convincing than teammate and previous main rival Gianmarco Pradel. The crash out in the lead battle also handed a maiden victory to Keanu Al-Azari. He might not quite be on Fairclough's level at the moment in terms of raw speed, but that matters little when he is the one bringing home the points anyway. FRECA delivered more of the by now classic Freddie Slater alone against RSGP kind of look. The Prema Ace did still take a pair of strong P2s on the road, but did get a crucial disqualification for technical infringement, keeping the championship nice and close for the time being. The simple fact that the RSGPs are taking points off of each other on a regular basis should still help him secure the title somewhat comfortably, I reckon. Talking about RSGP, Enzo Delini having an excellent weekend is no surprise at this point, but actually Bora's continued improvement absolutely deserves a mention. From a regular podium contender to now his first ever win, and a win which required a fairly robust defense against charging Slater as well. Unfortunately, Jin Nakamura was straight back to double DNF after finally scoring twice at Paul Ricard. Once again, he had the pace to fight well within the points, but the lack of conversion is becoming increasingly frustrating to watch. Then again, I suppose he's still doing an admirable job, considering this is his first time on these tracks, something that clearly separates him from all his opposition. Spanish F4 star Ian Aikmans has brought home his first point in FRECA, doing what experienced Enzo Peugeot couldn't quite pull off in the same amount of races. Sure, Aikmans does very much look rough around the edges in this series, but that is of course entirely expected for a mid-season debutant in his first year of car racing nonetheless. This little program might well set him up to be a title contender next season, provided he finds himself in a seat good enough to do so. And of course, a well-deserved shout-out for Nikita Bedrin, continuing his career as a miracle worker for Centerlock by dragging the car all the way to a podium finish. Let's just ignore the fact that it required a Slater disqualification. This was still a huge drive. We've not really talked about it for a while, but Formula Regional Americas was also back this weekend, and it honestly looked a bit samey to the rest of the season. Bruno Ribeiro, Nico Ambiado, Titus Sherlock and Jet Bowling were a clear, distinct lead group in both of the races, and the championship is also still fairly open, though Ribeiro and Ambiado do have a decent gap to the other two by now. Really, no matter what happens here, I'd love to see all four of those in a more competitive environment next year. Brief shout out for Jack Pollock for sneaking onto the podium for the first time ever, and thanks to a penalty for Ambiado, it even was a P2 in the end, but that did require a fair bit of luck and wasn't really representative of the pace, unfortunately. Aside from a quick shout out for Alexander Bondarev's maiden car racing victory, we'll skip the F4 level series. As I said, I've been away over the weekend, but we will absolutely talk about the conclusion of the European Karting Championship in our quick weekly karting report. The FIA European Karting Championship has had an exciting fourth and final round at Rugby with some proper wet weather chaos on Sunday, making for one of the most mental finals ever in the OK Seniors. But before we'll get there, let's talk about the OK Juniors and the title battle between Prema drivers Noah Baglin and Dean Hoogendoorn. Ferrari Junior Baglin did try his best and beat the Dutch Williams Junior on the road in the final, but Hoogendoorn's advantage was already too big thanks to a super consistent season from start to finish. Quite the contrast to his Champions of the Future stint we've discussed last week. Maybe he really clicks after that 1 week of practice, who knows. Either way, both of them are rightfully already signed by F1 teams. They really look like the stars of the future right now. Ali Kreisen may have won the final, but I'd rather shout out the man in P2. Lucas Els scoring his maiden podium after only making it to a final for the first time last round. Massive improvement over the season for the young Frenchman, and definitely a name to remember going forward, I reckon. And equally, Sebastian Eskandari Morandi deserves a shout out for his best weekend to date, even if an incident at the start of the final means he has no real results to show for it, unfortunately. The Aussie has been front running from the very first session, the first time I've really ever noticed him outside of some smaller WSK grids, to be honest. Hopefully bigger things to come in the future as well. And in the OK Seniors, the main story really isn't Christian Costoya winning the title. That was more or less expected. It isn't even him winning the title without scoring. It may be a bit mad, but the way we got there wasn't even more mad. A drying track in the final made for mixed tyre strategies, though the slick runners soon found out they had made a horrible mistake, running well off the pace and soon getting lapped and thus disqualified from the race, which, combined with some incidents, ultimately left us with only 13 drivers even finishing the final. Pure madness on a grid of 36. I definitely recommend checking out this race if you are into some sort of madness. And among those 13 finishing the race, the CRG Factory lads Victor Gustafsson and Davide Botaro turned out to have the quickest machines in the end once frontrunner Zach Drummond started fading late in the race. I believe this was the first time CRG did anything on this level of single-speed karting since former ace driver Gabriel Gomez graduated to owning kids in Italian F4. For Gustafsson, this must have been especially rewarding. He did get his fair share of hate for performing poorly against kids as a former world champion in KZ nonetheless, and a massively experienced driver all around. I reckon that had little to do with him, but oh well, we'll never truly know. Lots of people potentially deserve a shout out, but I think the most important one is Jensen Burnett. Not least because I think we've never talked about the Canadian driver. He clearly loved racing in low grip conditions and made the most of that opportunity here, not only taking strong results all weekend, but by extension, finding himself ahead of Daniel Carroll in P6 of the championship. Pretty strong campaign all around, and a driver whose car racing debut I am now very much looking forward to as well. And with this, we're already at the end of this slightly incomplete episode. There really was no time for me to catch up with all the F4 series just yet. Sorry about that, but as you can see here, I've been busy with other things. Turns out esports is pretty fun to watch if you don't have time for racing as well. Next week, we will see the return of Super Formula. Hopefully, I'll figure out a way to watch it this time, along with the entire road to Indy and some other bits and pieces, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, it is now your opportunity to share all of your opinions and predictions down in the comments so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.